Live on all platforms. Welcome back to Deal Flow Live. This is the show where we look at businesses that are listed for sale. We interview professionals that work in the space that can give us breakdowns on these deals and bring new context to how to look at the deal, whether you are selling a business or buying a business, just so that you can understand the world of M&A a little bit better and be able to navigate it, whether you're getting in as a buyer or a seller. And today we have a very special guest on, Patrick Lange, who actually specializes in selling and helping people buy HVAC businesses. Patrick, thank you so much for being on today.
Absolutely. I appreciate you guys having me. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. And we're telling you a little bit about just our experience kind of with your content going into this right before we went live today. Patrick actually puts out content across newsletters, YouTube, and a bunch of different places specifically about his kind of documenting his journey of selling and buying HVAC businesses, both himself and helping other people do it. And it really brings a new level of insight to the process that you don't get just by looking at the numbers. So I want to kind of start with your background before we get into that. But I would love to just hear a little bit about how you got into this and then how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of a meandering path, I guess. So after college, I became a financial advisor. I owned a financial planning company and did that for probably 12 or 13 years. And one day I woke up and it just wasn't fun anymore, right? I just didn't enjoy going into my own office. Sold that, and most people have a midlife crisis and buy a Corvette. I bought a swimming pool service company. So I had a client of mine that cleaned swimming pools. And man, I was so envious. It was flip flops and tank tops, and so instead of going to work in a suit and tie, I could go clean swimming pools. And so I did that, and we ended up growing that. I was in Central Florida, not terribly far from where you guys are. And we ended up growing it big, knowing the state as you do. I don't want to confuse the listeners or watchers, but we were cleaning pools from Lakeland to Naples and from Sarasota to Okeechobee. So I had trucks, not intentionally, going in every direction. So I bought the route first, and it was 2 days a week. And I was going to kind of just wrap my mind around it. And then I thought, wow, if I'm making X amount of dollars 2 days, what could I make 5? Then what if I put another truck on the road and then another truck and another truck? So we built it up, and I learned that people cared more about their swimming pools than they did about their finances. So when I had my financial planning company, I could take the week of 4th of July off and Christmas and Thanksgiving. And it seemed like every holiday somebody was swimming in their pool when I was working. So we built that up and ended up selling it off in sections because we were so big. It was a challenge to sell that big of a route, covering that big of an area. Learned a lot in the business. And actually, I went to a BNI meeting and I met a business broker, and I didn't know what a business broker was. And through the pool business, so I built my financial planning business and sold that without a broker. Then I had these pool businesses, and we were growing through acquisitions and organically. So we were buying, selling, and I was buying a lot of businesses off of Craigslist. Craigslist was big at the time. People were trying to sell businesses, and so I learned about acquisitions through that. Went to a BNI meeting, and I met a business broker, and I didn't even know what one was. I didn't even know they existed. Told me what he did, and I thought, well, wow, what do you need to do that? And he said, we just need a real estate license in the state of Florida. So I went and got a real estate license, went into the local Century 21 office and said, hey, I want to be a business broker. Well, they were kind enough to say, come in, but they weren't kind enough to tell me they didn't know anything about business brokerage. So the first year, it was a challenge to say the least. And then slowly I figured out what was going on. And at the time, we were in the Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte area, if you know that part of the state, selling a lot of businesses. And in that area, it's relatively easy to sell business because there's so many people moving to the area, right? Everybody from up north moving to Florida and buying businesses. Well, we decided to move to North Florida, where I live now, and I live in the country. There's not a lot of people moving here to North Florida to buy businesses in the middle of nowhere. So we moved up here, and my son at the time played high school baseball. And a guy on the team owned a heating and air company and asked me if I would help him sell it. So I took on the listing, and I love businesses with barriers to entry, and I love businesses that people typically won't do without. So in the pool business, times get lean. Somebody could clean their own pool. They could dump some chlorine in it. They can brush it themselves. What I loved about heating and air is most of the stuff you can't buy. Without a license, you can't get into it. Being in Florida and being married, I don't know a husband in the state of Florida dumb enough to tell his wife in the summer he's not fixing the air conditioning. So I thought it was a fairly recession resistant business. And so I ended up buying it. Instead of selling it to somebody, I bought it. I ran it for a little over 2 years. And I realized I missed the business brokerage world. I miss being active in businesses and buying and selling. And I love kind of peeling back the curtain, seeing what works, what doesn't work, how they're doing things. I love blue collar businesses like that. With heating and air, I meet so many millionaires that 20 years ago didn't like their boss, got their own license, started their own business, and built their way to prosperity. And I just love that story. So I went to sell my heating and air company, and I was still kind of brokering at the time, but not a lot. And I couldn't find a lot of information about it. We were a small company doing under $2 million in sales, and I couldn't find real data. If you were doing 20 million, there was information everywhere. If you're doing 2 million, it was hard to find anybody who could help. And I thought, wow, as a broker, if I can't find it, what about the guy who's been a heating and air technician for 20 years? He'd never find the information. So my son actually ended up buying me out. My son and daughter-in-law bought me out of my heating and air company. They run it today. My office, up until about 3 or 4 months ago, my office was in their office. So that was a little over 6 years ago. And at that time I decided, well, if I can't find information, there's probably some opportunity here. So I started just focusing on heating and air, first in Florida, then Florida, Georgia, then Southeast, and then we expanded nationwide. In the last 6 years, I've been fortunate to sell 137 heating and air companies. And so
Wow.
I get to look at a lot of deals along the way. So that's a long, short version of how we ended up here selling heating and air.
137. Let's break down some of the knowledge that you've gotten from that, because I don't know that I've ever met another person who's sold that many of one type of company in one type of industry. That's pretty incredible.
It's amazing.
And that was part of my kind of going to a niche, right? When I was looking at heating and air, I was still selling other stuff. And I felt if I sold a restaurant today, a gas station tomorrow, and a heating and air company the next day, I really couldn't add value to any of them, right? There's so many moving parts in every business. Sure, I could help them with the deal. Most deals are similar, but in restaurants, there's Coke machine or Pepsi machine leases, and there's ordering and the menu size and all these things, and refrigeration, and then in a gas station, it's about gallons of gas and what you're selling inside, and the different opportunities that are there. And then heating and air, it's maintenance agreements and commercial and residential. I couldn't know all of that. And so when I sold my last business that wasn't heating and air, it was a restaurant, as a matter of fact. And I thought, wow, I couldn't really help these guys. And so I really doubled down on heating and air at that time. And then I do a little bit of plumbing and electrical today. So not just heating and air, but very similar in nature. And often it's a heating and air company that also does electrical or also does plumbing. And so I'm able to do that as well. We're starting to expand a little more into heating, to plumbing and electrical. My son works with me now. My youngest has worked with me for a couple of years behind the scenes, and now he's full-time here as well. And so we're doing a little bit more of that. But really, to me, to be able to add value, I had to know what I was talking about consistently.
That makes perfect sense. And I think it's really admirable that you were able to see that and kind of like pivot into that, because a lot of people would just continue kind of like doing what they were doing and trying to sell all types of businesses. But it sounds like you were really trying to look out for the client there and be the best broker that you could be for their particular type of business. And obviously you'd had the operational experience yourself. So I would love to hear a little bit about, I think an interesting way to break into this is like maybe some common misconceptions about the process from both the perspective of the seller and from the perspective of the buyer. Just some of the common misconceptions about the purchase process that you've figured out and seen as patterns over those 137?
Yeah, some things that are both buyer and seller related. I think in the industry, in the business world, on shows like this, it always becomes about the multiple, right? It's a multiple of this. It's a multiple. What's the multiple? I'm getting a good multiple. I sold for a high multiple. Well, here's the reality. If your numbers are garbage, it doesn't matter if you get a 10-time multiple. 10 times $100 is useless, right? At the end of the day. So on the seller side, sellers are bragging about, I got this great multiple. We talked obviously before we went live, and I said, nobody brags about the bad deal they got, right? Nobody gets up on stage and says, hey, I shouldn't have sold my business, and I did a bad job of it. They all get up and say, oh, I got this crazy multiple. Flip that. Buyers call me daily and they want to talk about the multiple and what's the multiple of this and how did you get the multiple of that and where did that multiple come from? And I always ask them, how many heating and air companies have you bought? Well, none. Well, then why are you so focused on this multiple that you think is a right figure when you don't even have any data to back it up? So to me, and this is on all businesses, but specifically in the trades, and we talked about this too before we started, the numbers are the easy part, right? At the end of the day, you as a buyer have to feel comfortable with what you're paying for something. And me as a seller, I have to feel comfortable for what I'm getting paid for something. And we should both have those figures in our own mind, however we base them, whether it's comp data, what our friend told us, what my financial advisor says I need to get. We've got to have a number. And once we're okay with the number, it's all the other moving parts, right? It's staff, it's training, it's licensing, and I sell nationwide. Well, there's in the state of Florida, you have to have a heating and air license. Somebody in the business has to have a heating and air license to qualify the company. In Minnesota, it doesn't have a state license. Tennessee, if it's under $25,000 in sale price, it doesn't have to have a license. So you have to understand what's going on and what the barriers to entry, what you have to do, and who's going to qualify it. Is SBA going to cover it? There's so many things that go into it that everybody just wants to focus on multiple. I can't eat a multiple, right? Multiple doesn't pay my bills. It's the check at the end of the day. So understanding what that is probably the biggest thing I preach about.
I like that takeaway from the focus on multiple, because that is really, in some ways it can be a little bit of an arbitrary number. The most difficult thing I've seen, at least in looking at businesses like we do on the show and just like in all the deals that we look at, seems like the most difficult thing is that, unlike real estate, you really can't compare apples to apples. It's not apples to apples, it's apples to oranges in all cases. And so a multiple could be this weird thing because one HVAC company or any other type of company for that matter doing, let's say 500 grand a year in profit is not going to necessarily look the same as another one doing that. They are going to have different organizational structures and they're going to have different setups. They're all different expectations from the people in the business. I think it's really important to shift the focus away from that.
100%. And I believe in a multiple range, right? So you've got to find some way to put a value on a business, and a way to do that at the end of the day is somewhat of a multiple. And I use the term repayment schedule, right? If you invest the money, how long is it going to take you to get your money back? And so there's going to be a range, whether it's 2 to 5 times or 2 to 6 times. And then in that range, that business is going to lie. So let's use heating and air as an example. Is it commercial or is it residential? Which is worth more? Is it new construction or is it all service, repair, and replacement? Once again, it's in there. Is the owner in the field turning wrenches, doing the work, or are they in the office managing it? And what does that mean for you as a buyer? Because if I'm a buyer and I can turn the wrenches myself, well, then every penny that seller's making, I'll be able to make. But if I'm a buyer and I can't fix an air conditioner and I have to put a GM or I have to put a technician in their place, now all of a sudden that profitability comes down. So just assigning a multiple to a number without knowing all the other stuff that goes in it, you're doing yourself a disservice.
That makes total sense.
One thing that's been on my mind has been, When you're getting an initial reach out and it's a potential buyer, what sort of questions do you like to hear from a buyer, or what sort of things does a buyer ask that gives you an idea of, okay, this guy is serious and he knows he's going to be a good fit for something, probably?
Um, wow. I think asking, right? I have a lot of people who call me and they're an expert and they don't know anything. Right? You've been around a lot of those people, right? They want to call me and tell me how I'm wrong and that they know what the multiple is and this is overpriced and it shouldn't be that way and you can't include this. The ones that I see are successful shut up and listen, right? And the same thing when I bought my heating and air company, I still to this day can't fix an air conditioner. I climbed in a van with the guy going to install them and we went and installed air conditioners. I had to figure out what I didn't know, and so I shut my mouth and rode around and paid attention a lot. And so I think the first part is those willing to learn. I've now owned businesses that I couldn't operate. I couldn't do the technical side of the business. And the first 6 months in heating and air specifically, I didn't sleep, right? Well, if somebody quit, what am I going to do? And the world's going to come to an end. And so now I've sold a lot of companies to a lot of people who had no industry experience, but they were smart people. They were business people that understood focusing on what they could focus on, taking care of the customer, understanding pricing, marketing, image, customer experience, all these things that they didn't need to be able to turn a wrench. And so I think being willing to learn, being humble enough to know you don't know everything, and what else? They look for opportunities. I think some people by design in their life that they spend all their time looking for what's going to go wrong, and they're looking for the perfect deal. And I can tell you as a business owner who sold 137 heating and air companies, and if I've looked at all the ones I've sold that prior to just doing heating and air, I mean, I've probably sold 250 or 300 companies. There's not a perfect deal, right? I mean, being self-employed, you get up every morning and you don't really know what the day's going to bring. So you've got to have some flexibility in your life. I Maybe a better way to answer your question is who, when they call, do I think that's not going to be a good buyer, is going to be the one looking for the unicorn, right? They want this ideal company and management in place and pure profit, and they also want to pay a one-time multiple for it. And so they want all these things that are not real, and they've been looking for a year and a half and haven't found a good company. Well, to me, if you've been looking for a year and a half or 2 years, one or two things is real. One, you're not a buyer, is one thing. You're never going to write a check. Or two, you're not realistic in what you're looking for. And so you're wasting your time. You're wasting a seller's time. You're wasting potentially a broker's time. I'm a big believer in looking at as many deals as you can and understanding a deal, right? And you guys are doing an incredible job sharing this information with people so they can look at a listing on Biz Buy Sell or somewhere else and see, okay, that's what that is. That makes sense. Here's what I'm looking for. But there's people who spend 12 hours a day for 2 years. And there's a lot of companies for sale across the country. I can't imagine if you've been looking for 2 years, you haven't found one that's decent, right? And so I think that's probably a long-winded way of answering what I don't look for in a buyer is the expert who isn't an expert, who's looking for the unicorn that doesn't exist.
Oh, I think that's the perfect one because half this show is trying to prevent a generation of tire kickers from going and calling brokers. So,
yeah, and that exists, right? And I think you need to look at a lot of deals, right? I'm not saying looking at deals is bad, because I think until you've done it and look at it and understand it, it's challenging to wrap your head around it because most people are not educated in the deal. But at the same point in time, I have a lot of buyers who will call me and I'm looking for the perfect business, and I'll look and they've requested information on 25 listings scattered all over the country, all different size deals and different kinds of deals. And I'll say, what are you going to do for licensing? And they're like, licensing? Yeah, you need a license. Oh, I didn't know that. So you spent 2 years looking at businesses and you didn't know you needed a license? Do your homework. I mean, spend a little time understanding what you're trying to buy, big thing in the heating and air space is maintenance agreements. And maintenance agreements are kind of a loss leader in the space. The customer pays for their own loyalty, typically $200 a year. They'll go out to their house and service it twice, spring and fall, make sure it's ready for the heating season and cooling season. It doesn't generate a lot of revenue, but the customer's paying for their own loyalty. You're in the customer's home, so it's an opportunity to develop a better relationship and potentially identify other issues. There may be something else wrong you didn't catch. There may be upsell opportunities. So it's a great opportunity to bond with a customer. I have a lot of buyers that call me and say, well, how much is the maintenance program generating? Well, there's 200 maintenance agreements at $200 a year, not much. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a foolish question. Or we're on the phone with the seller. We set up a buyer seller call. Tell me how a maintenance plan works. Well, how have you been looking for 2 years and you didn't know what a maintenance agreement was or how the plan works? So I think that's probably my biggest pet peeve with buyers. I'm okay with buyers getting an education, but spend 20 minutes and look up something. I mean, there's so much information online. It doesn't take you long to be an expert in the heating and air space or the restaurant space or the commercial cleaning space, that you could do it relatively quickly.
I have a quick kind of industry specific question on the subject of maintenance agreements. What do you think about, there's this kind of like very, very niche, small like debate I've been hearing recently in the space, which is like to go maintenance agreements or just memberships. Have you heard about this at all? What's your thoughts after seeing everything?
It's the same thing. Some guys call them club memberships. Different companies have different names, but it's the same thing. At the end of the day, the customer's paying for their own loyalty for an escalated treatment, whether it's they're part of the membership program. And so if they call in the summertime, you go there first, there's different ways to do it. But to me, at the end of the day, it's the same thing, in my opinion.
Fair point. With that being said, I think it might be a good time to dive into a couple deals. What do you guys think?
It'd be criminal if we didn't have him analyze one deal here.
I've got a couple pulled up that are just kind of like
analyzing my own deals here. Am I going to get blasted for pricing something too high? Where are we at?
Oh
here?
God, no.
I was going to say we might want to skip any deals that are yours, just so you can kind of keep your like professional opinion on those. Let's look at stuff that is not listed by you.
He has good deals that we don't need to tell anybody.
Unless you want to go over yours.
No, all the deals he does are good. Let's just go to somebody else's.
Yeah, either way, I'm good with both. Heck, we can do some of theirs, and I can pull up some of mine. I'm good with that.
If you see one of yours on here, let's go for it.
Okay.
But I honed this down for anyone who's kind of just tuning in right now, or who's been tuning in, who's not familiar with the listing sites, who might be tuning in for the first time or something. You can put filters on here. So we've got it listed nationwide right now for HVAC businesses by industry. So we're only looking at HVAC businesses because that's really what Patrick specializes in. Any of these kind of strike your eye and look interesting to talk about?
Well, let's do the top one.
Yeah, I thought that one looked good too.
Let me do some math while we're looking at stuff here.
Looks like roughly about, my brain always starts dying by this time of the day, and I have to pull out the calculator.
So a couple things that jump out at me.
Uh-huh.
Oftentimes when we look at companies, I've said stay away from multiples, and now I'm going to talk about multiples. But so oftentimes it's on net income, but we'll see a cap on gross sales a lot of times. So when looking to buy a company, you'll see a cap on that gross sale figure. So $3 million price, $3 million company. This one's not crazy over it. What are we? $500,000. They're asking $500,000 over gross, so that's not crazy. They're doing. So let's do some quick math, and I'm gonna get my calculator out because it is very late in the day for me.
I got about 4.9 for the net profit multiple.
I did too, but I wanted to see what they're based on their sales. 652.
Someone in the audience says HVAC, let's go. Thanks for
So,
tuning in, Ninja. The something Ninja.
so they say they're netting 24%. That's pretty high, in my opinion. Typically, a company this size will be somewhere around 15%. Not saying it's completely unreal, um, but it certainly can be challenging. The other thing, can we scroll down the listing a little bit? I want to see if
Yeah.
they do talk about construction. They
70-30 commercial residential.
And normally that'll hurt the asking price, right? There's a lot of buyers in the marketplace now that want solely one or the other. Because the big challenge facing the trades and really facing most businesses right now is finding quality talent, right? And so depending on the commercial work they're doing, you may have to have a different type of trained technician. If they're doing heavy commercial, boilers, chillers, that kind of work, a residential technician may not be able to do it, so it can make it hard. So that would normally have an impact on price. So from what I'm seeing, net income seems high. So I'm guessing there's some ad backs in there, or the owner is extremely active in the business. The company does government work, so GSA military work. Doesn't say anything. My guess would be if they're doing GSA work, they're doing new construction, where it's not just service, repair, and replacement. 7 employees.
That looks low for the amount of revenue, I thought.
I would think so too, because you got to figure there's going to be a couple people in the office on a company doing almost $3 million in sales. So a lot of times a business like this, you'll see husband and wife, wife's running the office with some staff, husband's in the field. And so they don't count those as 2 employees, yet they're driving a lot of revenue to the bottom line of the business. So that's kind of what jumps out at me. Think it may be priced in the upper end of the market, but 30-year history. I would prefer more details, for them to have more details inside of there, about kind of breakdown of the revenue, what they're doing. And if we get to one of mine, you'll see I try to include it in there to try to save people time. What's commercial, what's residential, any new construction exposure, any maintenance agreements they have in place, that kind of stuff. On this, we don't know. So maybe we can go to the next one and see if that report does us a better job of getting it in there.
Yeah, get us out of here, Brody. Hey,
I was going to
Patrick.
try to specifically find one of yours as well.
Okay.
I would love to go through some of that stuff. Your business modification group, right?
Right. But it'll be under my name. Should be under Patrick Lange. So that's 600,000. Scroll down. That one has real estate. Oh, yeah. You just go to my page. So here, just go to buying. You're on my page there. Go to buying at the top of the page. All listings. Oh, go back to buying. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Active listings. I would have known my website by now. Click on active.
Here we go.
Let me try to find something. Some of these have different things going on with them. Scroll down. And it would be, so here you go, Northern Shore of Chicago. There's a nice business. Just listed it last week.
Which one?
Long-term.
Oh, right here.
So view listing. So if we can scroll, so that'll show on the page. So $350,000 SDE, asking a little over a 4-time multiple. Typically, you'll see a company this size sell between 3 to 4 times. And 130 changeouts in the last 12 months, 95% residential, 5% commercial. I know this one specifically. The commercial is residential equipment in a commercial setting. So it's office places, stores. So the same technicians service the same thing. The brands they offer, you see they have 370 maintenance agreements in place, 1,400 active customers, and they use QuickBooks, and they have a CRM system in place. So I tell also how much inventory is included in the price, what the rent is, and I'll normally say if they own the building or they're renting the building. In this case, rental, 95,000 in FF&E. And so in heating and air, typically FF&E is going to be trucks. And the beauty and the curse of the trades is you don't need many assets to generate a lot of revenue. So from a lending standpoint, SBA is really the only way to get a deal done because they'll loan based on cash flow. Where conventional lending would be a challenge in a deal like this because there's no assets. But that's the blessing and the curse. Well, and so here's an example. 5 full-time employees, they're doing $1.5 million in sales or 1.4 million in sales. The last one we just looked at had 7 employees and was doing almost 3 million. So once again, mathematically, I always
Something's
look at
not mathing.
Right. I always look at net income to sales and does it make sense? And then if it doesn't, normally it's because the owner's doing the bulk of the work. And so I don't know if you guys have questions on that, if that answered, or if that's what you guys would be looking for and looking at a deal. What are you guys are the experts. What do you think? Or what can I do to be better in giving the information out?
If we tried to call ourselves experts here, I think we would be those experts that you talk about that are not actual experts.
So you've looked at a lot of deals. I mean, if you're looking at a deal, does this answer the questions at the onset that you'd want to answer?
Oh, for sure. This is a very clean layout. This is if anyone's watching that's thinking about or is in the broker space, because you have some brokers who watch us, this is probably one of the nicest layouts, especially as a buyer, that you can see, because you immediately answer most of the questions that a buyer should have. And if you are a buyer looking to talk to a broker, write down all the things that are in this thing, and these are the questions that you should ask if it's not clearly listed on a biz buy sell site. The numbers match up. It's very well done. The CRM is there. You have a good breakdown. I mean, this is what you want to see, but we almost never see on like the general stuff.
This is key to the reason for selling.
Yeah, and I'm selfish in doing this. I do it this way because I don't want to have 50 phone calls with people who can't buy the business. So, like, I'll put for support and training. In this scenario, they're only willing to remain on short term. So, and I try to say that because if you're buying the business and expect somebody to stay there for a couple of years and run it for you, well, this would be an easy one to say, no thanks. I'm not interested in it. And so I try to highlight those facts to save myself time. When I first became a broker, I wanted to talk to anybody that I could. And now there's only so many hours in the day. So I've got to limit who I'm, talking to and answering questions on. And so I try to check those off. How long have they been in business? How many employees do they have? That kind of stuff. Is their CRM system in place? And many of these are because I talk to so many buyers who know what they're doing in the heating and air space, that they're going to call me and ask me these questions. So I'm going to try to put them in here ahead of time so they can look at it and say, ding, ding, checks my boxes, or nope, it's a pass. Let me go on to the next one.
I love that. One other thing that I wanted to bring up that's definitely a consideration and get your opinion on, just kind of like getting into like the niche specificness of this. This I would imagine would apply to a lot of like commercial services versus home services, like residential services. But one thing that I've seen in HVAC, because we're doing some consulting with I had shared with you, with a mostly commercial air duct company right now. They do like air duct cleaning. And one very real consideration with them from like an operational perspective that you don't ever really see come up in listings very often, is just something you don't think about if you're trying to buy a business, is the cash collection and how that works. And a lot of times commercial businesses are dealing with all these, especially with something like this, they're dealing with these very large businesses that might like only operate on net 30 terms. And so your cash collection process is very, very different. You might be doing work and not getting paid for 30, 45, 60 days sometimes.
And here's the other thing an uneducated buyer doesn't know. And I had a call about this last week, so I'm so glad you brought that up. They're making an offer and they're not including AR in their offer. So a guy called me, $8 million commercial company, did some new construction, some service. And I see with commercial, you'll typically see a lot more construction exposure. But so I asked him, he tells me, hey, I'm making this offer. Do you think it's a good offer? It wasn't my listing. He just asked me to take a look at it for him. And I said, okay, well, what's the AR? And he's like, well, I don't know. And I said, were you asking for AR? No, it's cash-free, debt-free transaction. And I said, normally on a residential service repair replacement, I agree 100%. But if you could have $2 million in AR outstanding in a deal that size, $8 million deal, you could have $2 million outstanding that's funding the cash flow of the business right now. And you're going to buy it. And now you're going to pay your guys, buy your equipment, do all these things and not get paid for 60 days. You either need to have some sort of working capital adjustment that's included in your purchase, or you're better get with your lender and make sure your bank's going to loan you another $1 million, because you'll go broke in the first few weeks because you didn't look at the AR component. Most buyers that are not educated, and this is most people, don't look at the balance sheet. They never ask for a balance sheet. They want to see P&Ls. But in a deal like this, if they have $1 million, $2 million, I have a commercial company listed in Orlando right now. They do 100% commercial new construction. They could be owed $1.5 million to $2 million at any point in time. It's a lot of money. And to not take that into account. And so when we price it cheaper, knowing that we're either going to raise the price based on a working capital adjustment, or they're going to have to come up with extra cash. And so it's priced cheap based on multiples. Once again, back to the multiples. I think they're doing like 1.5 million that's priced at 5.5 million. Well, if that was residential service and repair, it would have been $10 million asking price. So great point bringing that up.
Yeah, the particular one that I was talking about, I won't say, just for anyone who knows who it is, I don't want to give out the numbers attached to the business or anything, but they had, when we started working with them, they had about 1/7 of their revenue from last year outstanding. And for residential, that would never happen in residential. It just would never happen. But that was just pretty standard practice for them.
Brody, here's one thing on that. So in that sale, I didn't mean to talk over you and I apologize, but if it's not addressed in the sale, I buy the business tomorrow, you're owed, let's call it $500,000, whatever the figure is you're owed. So I buy it tomorrow. Who's collecting that? Are you going to be calling your old client saying, hey, you better pay me? And now they know you sold the business. What are the odds of you getting paid? And if it's your money, what do I care? If I'm the new owner, I'm not going to collect it for you. Why am I going to collect it? But as a new owner, I also don't want you, as the former owner, calling and threatening people who are now my clients, saying you got to pay me. And if it's recurring, so if it's a consistent client and they owe you $50,000, and now I step in and start doing work for them, well, when they start paying the bill, who are they paying? Are they paying you your old $50,000 stuff, or me for the work I just did? Well, if that check comes in and I didn't get the AR in the deal, I'm cashing the check. So it adds a layer of complexity back to, it's not just a multiple, it's everything else that goes with it.
It's like you said, if it wasn't addressed and that check just comes in the mail or gets delivered and I just bought the business, yeah, I'm cashing the check.
Patrick actually has a great video on his YouTube where he talks about as a buyer, all the things you have to factor into a sale, and he talks about stuff just like this, where it was vacation time rolling over, it was AR, there was a whole host of stuff. So everybody watching, make sure you go check out Patrick's YouTube channel and watch his videos as well, because he expands on a lot of this stuff, and it's really great content too.
It is. It's really in depth just with this.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, but accrued time off. Right? You're a seller. Yeah. You're selling your business. If I'm the buyer, and for years, I never saw people addressing it. Being honest, it's not something that was addressed on a lot of smaller companies. I started doing bigger deals, but you could have 10 employees who each could have, 2 or 3 weeks off. Now you inherit that 2 or 3 weeks off. Well, who's paying for that? It shouldn't be yours because they accrued it under the previous ownership. So great point bringing that up, Ryan. That's something that often gets overlooked. There's little things like that I didn't think about. With maintenance agreements, you talked about memberships. So that's something that's often talked about in heating and air. If I paid for a maintenance agreement, so $200, 2 visits a year, I paid $200 up front. You've done one of those visits. Now the new owner is responsible for going out and delivering on the second visit, but you have the money in the bank. So there needs to be some sort of credit there for that taking place. And a lot of sellers don't realize that. They could have a lot of maintenance agreements. They could accept the sale price. And now the buyer says, oh, by the way, you owe me $100,000 in the maintenance agreements. Well, now it changes the whole mathematics of the deal.
Or a buyer might not look for that and might go ahead and buy a business. The seller might be totally out of the picture. And then all of a sudden, a couple months go by, they get into like busy season and they've got all this obligation that they had no idea about.
And another thing, I'm active in Business Brokers of Florida. We have a state organization, and I'm on the state board for it. And another broker was talking about, does a lot of restaurants, and it was gift cards. So
wow,
there could be $20,000 in gift cards outstanding that they've been paid for. So how does that translate? And this one added, it was more complexity. It was sold through Groupon. So a gift card that has a higher face value than the business owner received, and now the new owner steps in. How does that work out? And what about the gift cards that don't get renewed? Do you leave it in escrow, and as somebody brings it in, then you get compensated? So there's things that you really need to think through, that once again, it's not just the multiple, right? It's not just the purchase price. It's everything else that comes with it. And you could think of a lot of businesses with gift cards and, flower shops. I've seen a lot of flower shops where you could buy 12 months kind of worth of flowers because you're an idiot like me and you don't remember to buy your wife flowers. So every, once a month they do something. So what about that kind of stuff, right? That they've been paid for it. Well, now you buy the flower shop and there's 100 idiots like me who've prepaid for this. And as the new owner, you want that guy to be happy, right? You want him to come back. He doesn't want to hear, well, the previous owner didn't give me the money for your monthly flowers. You're starting off on the bad foot. So there's little things that you need to consider with any business you're looking at.
Yeah, I think it's really important to dig into those things and really, this is part of the reason why, like, whenever someone asks me and it's like Ryan and I by no means are experts. Like we said, we know very little, right? But in just the little bit of looking that we have done so far, one thing that's become very apparent to me is the same way you've specialized as a broker. I think it's really important to specialize as someone who's searching for a business to buy and to really focus, even if it's not just one industry, focus on like a particular subset of industries or something at least fairly specific, so you can develop some subject matter knowledge and know what you're doing.
Great point. And that I'll go back to one of the first questions of, how do you know a buyer is going to be successful? And I said, let's look at the negative side and how they're not going to be. I can't tell you how many people email me saying, hey, I'm an independent searcher, or whatever terminology they want to use, and I'm open anywhere in the state of Florida for any business that makes me $500,000 a year. And it's like, you're so clueless. I mean, that's you can't say I'm going to buy anything anywhere, and so you're right. I think you have to educate yourself as a buyer, or you're going to buy a disaster. Because if you don't know that a restaurant sold gift cards, or the flower shop did pre-paid flowers, and you step in, you could buy a very good business that you now overpaid for because you didn't take the time to do the research of the industry on your own to understand what's taking place, and you didn't know the questions to ask. That's the biggest thing. And as a seller, I like to think most people are honest and ethical. But if you've owned restaurants your whole life and you've sold gift cards your whole life, you would think that they should know that there's gift cards there. You shouldn't think you'd have to call the buyer and say, now don't forget, I need to give you some money for these gift cards, right? I mean, you would think that they factored that into what they were doing, or they should have saw it on the P&L statement, the gift card income, and they should have known to ask the question. If you didn't do things with restaurants, you may not know, or didn't do the research in time to do that.
I love that. And I think those types of deep insights like gift cards, they often only apply to that particular industry or a subset of industries. So that kind of deep subject matter knowledge is what you get by just diving in and asking a lot of the right questions. Speaking of questions, we actually have a question from the audience that came in. So we have a lot of, like, obviously Ryan and I are on the younger side. We have a lot of younger viewers that join, and a lot of them actually often are going through college or have recently graduated, might be in graduate school looking at doing something like this. Ryan and I were just in graduate school last year, or finished graduate school last year. So a lot of our audience is kind of around that level. We had Queen Ruffin in the audience ask, how can a college student start learning the process to acquire businesses?
Well, I mean, obviously, online you could learn so much, right? And I think being around it, I know a lot of college campuses have ETA, entrepreneurship through acquisition programs. Um, it, they have different business buying clubs, depending on where you are, what the size of the school is. There's opportunities there. There's different meetup groups. And you could look at, entrepreneurship programs, and around the country, they're always having different meetups and different classes. Keep in mind, some of them are selling stuff. So understand that, what you're going to, there's a lot of people teaching these courses and they're charging a ridiculous amount of money for them. And what they're saying is not always accurate. And so I think there's a lot of good books, that you can read. I think, being a student of business, being a student of buying a business, you're doing that now, watching this class going on right here. And I think just doing more of that and ask questions. I have no problem with somebody sending me a question saying, hey, I'm looking at doing this. What do you think about that? I'm happy to help out any way that I can, because I want them to be successful.
I also think it's important to consume the right content. Everybody is online trying to sell or trying to say something. I think it's important to dial into the real experts. I think we are up and coming in our knowledge. We are students. We are just constantly trying to absorb everything. So we are a jumping point, I feel like, and thankfully we have been able to connect with true experts like Patrick here, who through him I found another individual whose name I don't remember, but it's an individual who is in the technology side of the HVAC and sales space. He's like an orange and green color scheme. Patrick, he has like a beard. I think you've posted on his stuff as well. But I followed him, and he led me to other people who are in the same sort of vein as this. And I've been learning just a lot just by following these guys. And they're not posting crazy TikToks with crazy captions. They're just giving real solid advice from the actual ground floor of it all.
Yeah, and I think one, look at people who've done it, right? I mean, because they're on stage saying they're an expert, look at the resume, right? And you can go onto LinkedIn and you can go into other places and get really look people up and see what they've done. And I think be real. Everybody's looking for a great deal, and sometimes we do it with blinders on. And you go to this course, and they're for $50,000. They're going to teach you how to buy a business with no money down. The seller's going to hold a note, and they're going to do everything. You're going to cash flow $1 million a year, and you're going to come on. If it was that easy, I wouldn't be working at 7:00 at night sitting on a podcast, right? I mean, at the end of the day, none of us would. And so I think that the reality of that is you've got to be realistic in your expectations, and kind of have a BS meter as you're looking at these things, thinking, is that real? And then two, why would they sell it, right? If they're never working and they have a full staff in place and they're making $1 million a year, but they're going to sell it to you and they're going to hold the note and take all the risk. Now, come on, it wouldn't happen.
I love that you brought that point up, because the thing that came to my mind immediately as Ryan was kind of going through that, and as you were, Patrick, is I think one of the biggest difficulties as a young person today trying to navigate this world is there's no shortage of information out there and education out there. You can find information on how to buy a business, the touch of your fingertips, immediately, instantaneously. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be good information. And I think one of the best ways I've found for kind of sorting through that, which is I think the best way to learn quicker, is to be able to sort through that information thoughtfully, is to look at like two sets of information and say, okay, well, this guy or gal over here is telling me this is very easy and can be done with no money down. Patrick over here, who's done it 137 times for other people, is telling me it's actually pretty hard and it's actually pretty complicated. There's a lot of stuff you're not thinking of. And I think if you're smart and you're perceptive, I think it's very obvious which one is the better information. It's the one that's colored with actual experience. It's the one that is giving a realistic worldview of how it actually is, because the ones that are telling you you can do it for zero money down immediately, very easily, anyone can get into it, they're just skipping steps and they're trying to sell something.
100%.
And Queen Ruffin said, I'm glad I found the live. I appreciate the advice. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in, by the way. For anyone else who has questions that's been watching, tune in, ask away. We would love to answer them. As we're kind of getting into the end here, though, Patrick, I would love to hear from you, just like kind of what you feel like the biggest kind of change in the HVAC industry has been the last couple of years, and what you're looking at for the next couple of years and where you see it going.
Okay, please don't say AI.
Yeah, that's one of the benefits, I think, of the trades. That I think there's an AI impact, but somebody's physically got to show up and fix it. And so changes, private equity's interest in the space, right? When I first started selling heating and air companies, it was mom and pops buying other mom and pops. Then it became sexy, and these big players have been consolidating in the industry and rolling companies up. That's definitely had an impact, positive and negative, and will have a lasting impact on it. It's also created a lot of young people who watch what they were doing and are doing it on a smaller scale. And so that's pretty neat, pretty cool. Kids whose parents sold to a big private equity group, watched how they did it, watched what they did, now they're duplicating it in another area. I think at the end of the day, we're in Florida. Back to my first intro, I don't know a husband dumb enough to tell his wife he's not fixing the air conditioner. So I think there's going to be opportunities in the trades. But we also have a more informed consumer in the trades as well, right? If a heating and air guy came to your house and said he was fixing your capacitor and he charged you $500, you're going to look up and see what are they online and see, I could buy that capacitor for $12. So you have a more informed consumer, not necessarily educated, more informed. So you're able to look up and see pricing and see things like that. And I think that's going to continue. The scrutiny is going to get harder and harder. I think the industry is coming out with different programs to try to take better care of the customer on some level, and to get more consistent cash flow. There's a lot of companies now that are leasing equipment. So instead of you buying a new air conditioner and paying $10,000 or $12,000 for it, they'll say for $125 a month, we'll install a brand new piece of equipment and we'll fix it and take care of it for the next 10 years. So they're grouping installation and service and customer concentration and deeper share of wallet into it. I don't know how the repo part of that works, so I don't know if you don't pay your monthly fee and then they come cut your equipment off the wall. I don't know how that works in detail. There could be some complexity in that, but so I think the industry is shifting. In life, everything you own is going to a subscription-based model. You can't buy an iPhone anymore. They just add $26 to your monthly bill or whatever it ends up being. And so you can't get more storage now. You have to pay $1 extra a month. So everything's going to that subscription model. And I see that happening in the trades as well.
It's a great note. And we had another question come in. August Hunt wants to know, how should you connect with business owners to learn these skills and techniques? I guess if you're getting into the space.
Well, you guys went. I mean, there's trade shows all over the country, lots of them. So you can go there. If you look up trade, heating and air trade show near me, you'll be able to find something going on. There's different organizations, training organizations that you could go to. Go get a job, right? Go to work for somebody. You can climb in the truck. I mean, most companies are struggling to find people that are willing to go to work, and you can go and get paid to learn a trade, and often quite well. I mean, I see heating and air guys that are making multiple six figures, that just a couple of years ago were riding around the back of the truck doing installs. So there's an opportunity for those who are willing to work to go and get paid for it. An MBA is not for everybody, right? At the end of the day, some people are not textbook and school people. It's a great opportunity to go get paid and go to work. So I think there's a lot of opportunities out there.
I think to Patrick's point, what he's saying is that there's no secret sauce. It's not A down upright BBA. Oh, you unlock the cheat code to life. It's you just gotta Google it, search it, go out and do it. Like it's how he has gotten where he is going out and doing it. 137 businesses is no accident, and counting, frankly.
Yeah, and I think so. I believe success leaves clues, right? I mean, you could buy all sorts of books on all sorts of successful people. I've made a tremendous amount of mistakes in my life, and I've called those mistakes paying for an education. If it costs me enough money, I won't do it again. And so that's been my belief. I'm going to do it, and if it works, fantastic. We'll do more of it. If it doesn't work, it stings a little bit, and get up the next morning, get back, and go to work and do it again. So I believe in education. I believe in school. I think that there's a lot there, but there's a lot to be learned with rolling up your sleeves and going out and just doing it, making it happen. And if there's young people, that are watching like you guys, then what a better opportunity. I mean, I changed my entire business in my 40s, and I had kids in college and house payments.
Wow.
And so, if you're an opportunity to do it while you're young, you're going to roll the dice when you don't have anything or don't know anybody anything. It's a great opportunity to do it.
I love it. And last thing, kind of a selfish question, just because it's something I'm very interested in personally. You mentioned in there roll-ups of HVAC companies. What are your thoughts on that? I know you said it's brought positive and negative impact. After selling 137 of them, I'm sure the thought has crossed your mind to roll some up. What are your thoughts on HVAC roll-ups?
So I think they can be good or bad. So the industry had done it previously, and it kind of fell apart. So it's like flipping houses, right? At some point, you've got to find somebody to be able to buy it. And are you the first guy flipping or the last guy flipping? And that has a lot to do with it. I'm looking more, my son owns a heating and air company today. He and I talk a lot about acquiring other companies and doing a small roll up, not for the plan to flip it, but to have shared services, right? He can go to another town and have the same accounting back office and have the same insurance back office and have the same, all these different things, that he could just duplicate it. And so I think that there's an opportunity to do that kind of stuff. There's a lot of great buyers and a lot of great roll-up people, and there's a lot of bad ones, right? At the end of the day, I don't always agree with squeezing margins for the sake of squeezing margins, but those people end, right? You can only squeeze margin so much. I firmly believe in any industry, in any business, a customer and employee will vote with their wallet. If you take good care of your people and pay them right and respect them, they'll continue working for you. If you take good care of your customer and you give them value for what you charge, they'll continue to use you. The minute you stop, they won't. And so money works its way into where it's supposed to be. It's where the value's being delivered, whether that's from an employee standpoint or a customer standpoint. So I think there's a lot to be learned from the private equity, and these roll-ups taking place. There's good, and there's a lot to be learned of what not to do. And so I think both apply and both can be informative.
I love the it depends answer because it's a very complicated, nuanced problem or occurrence with problems and benefits. That's great stuff. Patrick, anything else you would want the viewers to know just about the HVAC industry, about buying or selling a company in heating air, anything like that?
And this is not just heating and air. I think I think a big problem I see for especially young people, and especially young people with MBAs. So this is not meant to be a cheap shot to you guys. Um, I think textbooks always preaches big, right? You've got to have $1 million, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do that. I have watched so many small companies be bought and be exploded overnight. There was so much low hanging fruit. Use heating and air as an example. Great companies run by the same technician for 30 years. They were great at fixing air conditioners, not great at running a business. So somebody with some business sense and some business knowledge can step in and explode that business. I think too often we look too big because we think we have to buy it big instead of make it big. And so that would be the one thing. Um, if you're looking at businesses, don't think it's got to be this multi-million dollar deal. You could start small, and that's part of the paying for education. You could go buy this huge business and spend a bunch of money and learn how to do it, or you could buy a smaller company and learn how to do it and then magnify that business. And often you can grow faster, cheaper, and better. And so that would be probably the one thing.
I love that, just because there's always going to be more low hanging fruit if it's smaller.
Right.
That was amazing stuff, Patrick. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for tuning into Deal Flow Live. Again, we do this every Tuesday night, right around 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm sure we will be trying to have Patrick on again soon. This has been an incredible episode, with a really great focus on an industry Ryan and I are very interested in. And we know we have a lot of viewers that are interested in too. Patrick, where's the best place for people to find you and follow your stuff?
Yeah, I'm active on social media. I'm active on LinkedIn and Facebook. I have a YouTube channel, which you guys mentioned, just my name, Patrick Lange. My website, businessmodificationgroup.com. All my contact information's on there. If I can help anybody, have a question, give me a call, send me a note, connect with me socially. If I can help out in any way, I'd love an opportunity. I really appreciate you guys having me on. I had a great time. Hopefully, viewers or watchers, listeners got some value out of it. It was worth an hour of their time to jump on today.
It was certainly worth an hour of ours. I think we probably could have gone for 17 hours just talking about this stuff.
I paid for an MBA and I didn't get half the stuff he said. So, like, what was I doing?
Right. That was awesome stuff, though. And August Hunt says thanks as well again in the chat. Thanks again so much. And guys, go out and follow Patrick if you're even if you're not thinking
the video too, so people can find that easier.
Yeah, and go check out our post on LinkedIn to get a little bit more information and find Patrick. Follow him, even if you're not buying an HVAC business, if you're looking to buy something else, because a lot of these tips apply and are things that you should be thinking about regardless of what industry you're looking into. These are the kinds of things that you're not going to find in most cases of people that are sharing about this type of thing. So it's just a really great level of insight. And we will see you guys on the next episode next week, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Tune in for it. And we're glad to have you as always.
See ya.